Justice Watchers, before we begin, I want to make this absolutely clear. The following broadcast contains public domain courtroom footage, commentary, and legal analysis. This content is presented under the Fair Use Doctrine as defined by 17 USC 107 and is protected by multiple Supreme Court rulings, which you see below. This stream is transformative, educational, and journalistic in nature. It includes original commentary, trial breakdowns, legal interpretation, and critical analysis, not raw redistribution. We do not claim ownership over any public domain footage, and all use is strictly within legal bounds. If you're watching this content, you're engaging in a protected, transformative experience, grounded in law, never in speculation. And if anyone has a problem with that, take it up with Campbell, Brady, Miranda, and Irvin. Remember, guys, justice always works better when we watch. So keep watching. See you in the courtroom.
All rise, court's in session. Facts, I'm dead. Diddy in the hot seat. Facts with the check. From the yacht to the cell block. Fame to fight. Now it's Rico on the record. Courtroom night. Bad boy passed, but this ain't no hit. 12P is in the box. Got an answer for it. Media flashing. Lawyers pressing. We breaking it down. This trial's a lesson. Justice is a process. No spin, just bars. Peeling back the stories, exposing the scars. Cross exams tight like a closing line. Diddy on trial, and we're pressing for time. From whispers to wiretaps, cash to the plea. We follow the facts, not celebrity. No settle, no silence, no PR shield. Just truth in the room and the verdict revealed.
So, welcome to the first Diddy recap session that we're going to have here. This is how we're going to cover the Diddy trial. You didn't think I was going to cover it or figure out a way, but we're going to figure out a way. So, I'm going to take you through here, curated recap of everything that happened in the courtroom. We're going to talk about it. I'm going to drop it for you here so you can understand what's happening. Because federally, of course, there are no cameras in the courtroom, so we have to get creative. So this is going to be a curated justice as a process exclusive breakdown where we're going to break it down. This is a culmination of news media coverage around the country, all covering the case, and I'm going to bring it to you in a very nice summary. So I'll be reading it to you. I've created this myself, so I'll be kind of narrating us through this. We'll stop, we'll talk. Let me know your feedback if this gets good stuff. We'll do some lives as I'm transitioning back into getting into the live game again here now that things have settled down on a personal basis. But for now, we're going to jump in. So the background on this case, if you're not familiar with the Diddy case, I don't know who isn't, but maybe there's some of you that aren't. Diddy, of course, is a famed music artist, founder of Bad Boy Records, considered to be a mogul of sorts in the music industry. And for years, it had been rumored that Diddy had parties and things going on that were of an adult nature. And some of these things were alleged that people were being blackmailed and tapes were being used, and there were various nefarious things happening at these parties that was allowing Diddy to have influence over the record industry and the entertainment industry, and that he would host these parties and things would happen. Well, it all kind of blew up when an ex-girlfriend of his sued him, along with an ex-producer also at the same time filed a lawsuit. And inside that lawsuit was all these explosive claims that eventually culminated in federal RICO charges and trafficking charges. I won't say the first part of it, but trafficking charges. alleging that he was doing some pretty terrible things to people. There was a big time federal bust that happened in springtime or the springtime of 2024, followed by an indictment in September of 2024. And he's been held with no bond. He's attempted bond 3 separate times and was unable to secure bond. And he pushed for a fast trial. He hired um, a who's who of legal power in the federal game. And right now, as you're going to hear, Mark Garagos' daughter, her name is Tenny Garagos. She's on the defense team. Mark Agnolfo is on the defense team. Uh, Braffman, I can't remember his first name, is on there, and he was actually represented Diddy during the famous nightclub shooting case. Benjamin Braffman, that's his name, is on the defense team. There's a who's who. Mark Garagos is consulting, and it's been a pretty. They've been in the press. They've been saying that Diddy is guilty of nothing more than adult behavior and having some activities that he liked to engage in that maybe some might not agree with, but that are not criminal. The state, on the other hand, or the United States, on the other hand, says it's totally different. That he has been trafficking women, that he's been um, forcing people to do things against their will, and that he has used these things to blackmail people and put people in a position of put him in a position of dominance over people, and that's what we're going to see play out. So we're going to get into it. Finally, there was over a week of jury selection, just over a week. Juries, actually, I think it was just a straight week actually of jury selection. There was some objections from the jury due to some exclusions based on they excluded some um, black jurors, and the defense was upset about that. They raised their objections, and then yesterday it kicked off opening statements and 2 witnesses, and we're going to get into all of that as we go here. So let's jump into the courtroom. Give me a moment here, or well, you see what we have up here. I'm going to take you in a courtroom of pictures. So this is what the courtroom looks like. This is what Diddy looks like in court. It's his defense team. He's sitting there, and we're gonna kick this off. So jury selection, trial kickoff. So let's get into this. Sean Diddy Combs' long-awaited federal trial opened on Monday in Manhattan um, with a packed courtroom and heavy security. The 55-year-old music mogul um, arrived wearing a light gray sweater and sporting newly gray hair, looking calm as he hugged his team of lawyers and gave a thumbs up to supporters. And there he is right there giving the thumbs up. You could see that, including his mother, Janice Combs, who was in the audience, and several of his children who were escorted into the courthouse ahead of crowds. And we have some exclusive shots. There's his family coming into the courtroom. And additional shots. They were escorted in. Inside Judge Aaron Subramanian's courtroom, a final pool of 45 prospective jurors had been whittled down by mid-morning, and the court created a panel of 12 jurors and 6 alternates under anonymity orders. Their identities known only to the court and counsel, a precaution often taken in high-profile cases. Judge Subramanian emphasized to the jurors that anything you've seen or heard outside the courtroom is not evidence. Also assured them, we will keep your names and identities in confidence, underscoring the sensitivity of the case. Jury selection was not without a brief dispute, and I noted this earlier. Combs' defense objected that prosecutors had used peremptory challenge to strike 7 black jurors from the jury. In response, lead prosecutor Maureen Comey, daughter of former FBI Director James Comey, stood and provided race-neutral explanations for each strike, citing factors like one candidate's open admiration of celebrities on Combs' TV show and another possible agenda due to financial indifference. After hearing these reasons, Judge Subramanian rejected the defense's bias claim, finding no purposeful discrimination in jury selection. By 10:30 a.m., the 12 jurors and 6 alternates, reportedly 12 men and 6 women, so for those of you wondering the makeup of the jury, it's 12 men, 6 women, I'll repeat that, were sworn in and instructed on their duties. And remember, once they're sworn in, jeopardy attaches. So the trial's begun. It's a major, major moment. The judge delivered standard admonitions, warning jurors not to consume any media about the case or discuss it with anyone. Um, and with the jury finalized and instructions given, the stage was set for opening statements in the United States versus Sean Combs, a trial expected to last up to 8 weeks. So now we're going to get into the state opening here. There is the prosecutor. Um, Assistant U.S. Attorney Emily Johnson opened for the government shortly before midday, introducing the jurors to a starkly different side of the hip hop icon. To the public, he was Puff Daddy, Diddy, a cultural icon, a businessman, larger than life. But there was another side to him, Johnson said, pointing across the courtroom at the defendant. Over the next hour, the prosecutor sketched an expansive portrait of an entertainer who, behind the scenes, allegedly ran a criminal enterprise for 20 years with the help of a tight inner circle. She told jurors that Combs' businesses and entourage were not just for music and fashion, but were used to sexually exploit women and to cover up crime after crime committed at Combs' behest. Johnson rattled off a list of crimes the jury would hear about: kidnapping, arson, drugs, X crimes, bribery, and obstruction, all part of an alleged pattern of abuse enabled by Combs' staff and associates. For example, Johnson said the evidence will show Combs even had a man's car set on fire and once dangled a woman over a balcony to instill fear. She described Combs as a boss who imposed impossible demands on those around him when employees failed. He would throw objects at them, pressure them into drug use, and sexually blank, I can't say the word here, sexually hurt one female staffer in an act of workplace violence. The core of the prosecution's case, however, centers on Combs' alleged abuse of women over 2 decades, particularly through events he euphemistically called freak offs. Johnson explained that these were highly orchestrated, drug fueled sex parties arranged by Combs' team in hotel suites around the country and abroad. She said Combs' own company funds were used to stage these encounters, setting up his preferred lighting, stockpiling extra linens, lubricant, and a so called med bag of drugs. In these sessions, Johnson asserted Combs compelled women, often girlfriends or young women under his influence, to consume substances like ecstasy and to engage in acts with male prostitutes, while Combs watched recorded videos and gratified himself. The women were expected to pretend they enjoyed themselves, Johnson said, because Combs would later use the explicit footage as blackmail to ensure their silence and obedience. According to the prosecution, these freak off encounters sometimes lasted for days on end. Participants were left so drained that Combs' staff kept IV drip bags on hand to help them recover. Johnson's opening statement walked the jurors through several alleged incidents of violence that underpin the racketeering trials. One key episode she detailed involved Combs' longtime girlfriend, R&B singer Cassie Ventura. Jurors heard that Combs abused Cassie for years while they were a couple. In one particular vicious attack around 2012, after Combs suspected Cassie had been with another man, he effectively kidnapped one of his own employees to track her down and then beat Cassie brutally, kicking her and flinging her around like a rag doll, Johnson recounted. He allegedly told Cassie that if she ever defied him again, he would ruin her career by releasing videos of her in the most humiliating situations, the very recordings from freak-offs that he kept as leverage. Her livelihood depended on keeping him happy, Johnson said of Cassie, emphasizing the power imbalance in their relationship. Another incident described to the jury involved a second woman, identified only by the pseudonym Jane. Johnson warned that jurors would see evidence of Combs brutally beating Jane as well. She described how in late 2024, Jane confronted Combs after enduring years of being forced into freak-offs, especially as she watched Combs' lavish attention on other women in public. In response, Combs allegedly chased Jane through a house, kicking down locked doors as she tried to hide in various rooms. Johnson said Combs caught her, put her in a chokehold, and kicked her to the ground. Even as Jane laid curled up, Combs continued the assault. He punched her face, dragged her by the hair, and slapped her so hard she fell over, and then ordered her to call an escort and conceal her bruises with makeup so that she wouldn't ruin his night. This was all because Combs was eager to move on with another prearranged freak off that evening, the prosecutor explained. Johnson argued that in Combs' world, violence was a tool to ensure he got what he wanted. In both the Cassie and Jane incidents, physical brutality secured the woman's submission to his sexual demands. Prosecutors also previewed for the jury how Combs and his inner circle allegedly covered up these crimes. In the aftermath of the 2016 hotel assault on Cassie, an event the jurors would soon see on video, Johnson said Combs' team scrambled to retrieve any footage and silence witnesses. She revealed to the jury that a security guard was handed a brown paper bag stuffed with $100,000 in cash, an apparent payoff for confiscating what was thought to be the only recording of the hallway attack. This is far from the only time the defendant's inner circle tried to close ranks and do damage control, Johnson told the jury, indicating that the jury would hear evidence of other hush money and intimidation efforts. Indeed, Johnson reminded jurors that Combs was recorded apologizing after that 2016 incident once it became public. And when a snippet of the surveillance video aired on CNN in late 2024, Combs issued a statement saying he was disgusted with himself and that he took full responsibility for what he did to Cassie. But prosecutors made it very clear that they're going to show the jurors their own unedited clips from the hotel's cameras rather than the abbreviated footage that aired on TV in the fall of 2024. By the end of the prosecutor's opening, jurors were told to brace themselves for graphic evidence. Johnson said they will see videos of Combs' abuse with their own eyes, including recordings of Cassie and Jane during coerced freak-offs and violent aftermaths. Two of Combs' accusers will take the stand early in the trial, Johnson noted, to describe in painstaking detail how these events unfolded. The government will also call former Combs employees, for instance, a personal assistant who claims Combs sexually assaulted. Well, we're going to go with it, assaulted her, and staff who were ordered to procure drugs or procure sex partners to testify how they were drawn into facilitating and then concealing Combs activities. In sum, Johnson told the panel, the evidence will show that for 20 years, the defendant, with the help of his trusted inner circle, committed crime after crime after crime. That's why we are here today. That's what this case is about. Now, next, the trial or the case moved on to uh, the defense opening, and Tenny Garagos handled it. So, obviously, that was something, very explosive, um, very explosive uh, state open or prosecution opening state. It laid out a lot of stuff, a lot of things in there, and it laid out. They laid out that obviously a majority of what this is now. Again, I guess we're going to hear this in the defense, but again, what everyone has said that what this layout is, a lot of this is going to track along the relationship he had with Cassie, who was an R&B artist. He was her boss. He also turned what should have been a employee employer relationship into a romantic relationship, and he put her in a position to where she felt like she didn't have the ability to say no to certain things. And that's going to be the argument the United States government's going to make. And then they're going to argue that there was trafficking of people, in other words, moving people over state lines for purposes of sexual activity. And they're going to allege that is illegal to do that if that's what the purpose is. And for him, again, this is where even a defense of consent is difficult. Now he's going to allege, again, we'll see how this plays out. So, but very, very, a very, very, very graphic case it looks like it's going to be for the state. And I think you're going to see I'm calling them the state for the government. We have to call them the government in federal court. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be a difficult situation for the defense to overcome these videos and these things where you see him mistreating her or mistreating these women. And, we'll see what the defense says here. Anyway, so let's jump into that, and then we'll kind of talk about what's going on here, and we'll get kind of an analysis between the two and where things stand, and then we'll get into the two witnesses to testify. But I don't know why it keeps jumping back to that. I apologize, guys. All right, so the defense opening statement. So next, Tenny Garagos handled the defense's opening, and that is Mark Garagos' daughter. She's considered to be a very solid attorney. She was the one that delivered the opening, which I think was a strategic move because the prosecution team in this case, the government team, is all women. So I think it was good to have a female touch defending Combs. So here we go. So if the prosecution sought to portray Combs as a predator cloaked in celebrity, the defense countered with a very different narrative. Attorney Tenny Garagos, part of Combs' seven lawyer defense team, and daughter of prominent lawyer Mark Garagos, began by acknowledging the media frenzy surrounding the case. There has been a tremendous amount of noise around this case over the past year. It is time to cancel that noise, Garagos told the jury, urging them to focus only on the evidence presented in court. She painted Combs not as a criminal kingpin, but as a flawed man whose private life, however unconventional or unsavory, has been grossly distorted by prosecutors. Sean Combs is a complicated man, but this is not a complicated case. Garagos declared that at the outset that this case is about love, jealousy, infidelity, and money. In the defense's telling, the allegations largely boil down to personal relationship drama and sensual adult activity being miscast as federal crimes. Garagos wasted no time admitting some unflattering aspects of her client. Sean Combs has a bad temper, she conceded, detailing that he could become out of control when he drank alcohol or did the wrong drugs. He could be a mean, jealous, even violent at times. You may end up thinking, I think he's a jerk, and I think he's kind of mean, the defense lawyer told jurors candidly, but he's not charged with being mean or a jerk. The defense emphasized this point repeatedly. None of the charges against Combs are for general bad behavior. Domestic is not sex, Garagos argued, and you have to fill in the blanks there. I apologize. Noting that if Combs were simply accused of assaulting an ex-girlfriend, we would not be here now in a federal RICO trial. In other words, the defense does not deny that some incidents of physical violence occurred, but they maintain these were isolated domestic disputes or outbursts, not part of any organized criminal scheme to coerce sex. Being mean is not a racketeering enterprise, Garagos said pointedly. According to the defense, Combs' extravagant sexual lifestyle was 100% consensual. Garagos described her client as someone who led a swingers lifestyle and had kinky sexual preferences, but she insisted that those sexual predilections did not equate to sex trafficking. She acknowledged jurors may see things in evidence that may make them uncomfortable. There's going to be explicit videos, sex toys, perhaps fetishistic behavior, yet admonished them, you are not here to judge Combs and his sexual preferences. Garagos characterized the women at the center of the case, including Cassie and Jane, as capable, strong individuals who made free choices to be involved with Combs. Cassie, she noted, stayed in a relationship with Combs for about a decade and often consented to unconventional sexual experiences. When Cassie finally left him in 2018, after hearing Combs refer to another woman as his soulmate at a funeral, she did so without any retaliation or harm from Combs. The defense pointed out what Combs understood was that she was a willing participant in their sex life, Garagos said of Cassie, suggesting that only later did Cassie become embittered and motivated by money to reinterpret their past. Likewise, the defense argued that Jane had a toxic, dysfunctional, on-again, off-again relationship with Combs, marked by jealousy on both sides, but that she too willingly participated in the sexual scenarios that prosecutors now call trafficking. Being a willing participant in your own sex life is not sex trafficking, Garagos asserted, distilling the defense's core thesis. To counter the RICO racketeering charge, Garagos contended that there was no criminal enterprise at all. Combs, she said, is a successful artist entrepreneur who indeed had many employees and associates, but none of them conspired to commit crimes. No witness will say they were part of a corrupt enterprise because there was not one to be a part of, the defense declared. Garagos then methodically addressed each specific allegation to plant seeds of doubt. For instance, on the claim that Combs kidnapped an employee related to tracking Cassie down, Garagos argued that the individual in question continued working for Combs for over a decade after the supposed incident, and even asked to rejoin his staff after leaving, implying there was no abduction or ill will. On the arson charge, stemming from an accusation that Combs ordered a man's car burned, the defense flatly said Combs was not involved, and that incident is uncorroborated. Garagos also attempted to reframe the notorious 2016 Los Angeles hotel assault on Cassie. Yes, Combs is seen attacking Cassie on the video, but Garagos told the jurors that context matters. She claimed that the altercation was a personal dispute over a phone, and as horrible as it looks, it was not an instance of Combs trafficking Cassie for sex. It is evidence of domestic violence, Garagos said of the video, not evidence of sex trafficking. In the defense's narrative, Combs was a flawed individual who sometimes lost his temper and even committed assaults out of jealousy or intoxication. However, none of that, they argue, was done to force women into prostitution or sexual slavery, as the prosecution alleges. The defense noted that Combs has not been charged with domestic violence, only with federal crimes like sex trafficking and coercion, which require proof of a scheme or a commercial sex element. Garagos strongly maintained that every encounter the jury will hear about was consensual at its core. The conduct at issue in this case was perhaps unconventional, but was never criminal, she said, arguing that the government is overreaching into a celebrity's private life. On the sex trafficking and prostitution counts specifically, the defense attempted to redefine the transactions. Combs is accused of transporting men across state lines for prostitution, the male sex partners in the freak offs. But Garagos told the jury that what Combs actually paid for was the men's time and experience as adult entertainers, liking them to pornographic actors, not prostitutes. She previewed evidence from one such entertainment company that advertises services for private ladies' nights, implying that Combs hiring male strippers or performing for consensual group sex sessions does not meet the legal definition of sex trafficking. The defense cautioned jurors not to impose your moral beliefs on what they might hear about Combs' sex life. Instead, Gerger suggested that the government was effectively trying to criminalize infidelity and promiscuity. Yes, Combs cheated on partners, hosted decadent parties, the defense said, but none of that is a federal crime. He did not commit any of these acts, Gerger insisted, with regard to the indictment's specific charges. She acknowledged that evidence will show Combs used drugs, referencing his well known love of baby oil in intimate sessions as an example, and that he could be crude, but those are not federal crimes. Before concluding, Garagos addressed the bribery and obstruction allegations around the hotel security guard payoff. She contended that when Combs handed cash to the hotel guard in 2016, it was not to impede a police investigation. It was simply to keep an embarrassing incident out of the tabloids for the sake of Combs and Cassie. In the defense's view, Combs' actions may have been morally questionable or jerky, but they were not the crimes he's charged with. Garagos struck a conversational tone at times. She almost empathizing with the jury's likely reactions. She admitted, listen, jurors might personally dislike Combs after hearing all the testimony. I think he's a jerk, was her own phrasing, but she urged them to put those feelings aside, focus strictly on whether the prosecution can prove an actual racketeering, conspiracy, or sex trafficking scheme beyond a reasonable doubt. We'll fight first throughout the entire next 8 weeks, Garagos vowed in closing, asking the jury to keep an open mind that the salacious noise around the case does not equal guilt in the courtroom. So, wow. Um, what what an opening statement. So again, what they are attempting to do is reframe this as swinger lifestyle. They're saying that the prostitutes were not prostitutes, that they were entertainers, that they were hired through an agency for purposes of entertaining by emulating pornography. What an interesting claim, because that was the one that this was the part of the defense that I thought was going to be the biggest problem for them. Because if you pay somebody to come across state lines, it seems to be pretty cut and dry. But if you're not paying them for that, you're paying them for the entertainment, you're paying them for their time, that blurs that line. And the question is, did you get to say beyond a reasonable doubt what that is? And for me, I think, listen, this is a situation to me where I think, you know, it's dangerous because this is what I've said from day one about this case. This was about aggrieved lovers who later come back and decided I want to make some money off of something that happened. And I have a problem with that. I do. Because I thought it was a big bit of a stretcher in how they were and how the federal government was reaching. And we're going to see how this plays out as the witnesses come up. Now, the first witness that's called to the stand, okay, it is let's see here. His name is Israel Flores. Um, so he is the hotel security guard who worked at the Intercontinental Hotel, who was present during the Cassie situation. So let's jump into this here now. Give me a moment. And we'll get to Israel Flores. All right, there he is. All right, so there he is, guys. So after the closing or opening statements, they had a brief lunch recess. And the prosecution launches directly into testimony. And they begin with the incident that both sides already foreshadowed. And this was pretty much the thing that is the central piece of this case. I mean, it's this video. The March 2016 altercation between Combs and Cassie at a Los Angeles hotel. The first witness, Los Angeles security officer Israel Flores, took the stand early Monday afternoon. That's him up on the screen there. Flores worked security at the Intercontinental in Century City, and on March 26, 2016, he responded to a radio call of a woman in distress on the 6th floor. When he stepped off the elevator, he testified he immediately saw a man and a woman in the hallway who matched the report. I observed a male and a female in the elevator lobby. I seen Mr. Combs in a towel and some colored socks, Flores recalled, adding that he recognized the man as Sean Combs. Combs was clad only in a towel around his waist and side. He was staring at Flores with a scary, devilish look, the guard said. By contrast, the woman, Cassie Ventura, was visibly frightened and trying to cover herself. She was pretty much in the corner, according to Flores. As Flores approached, he noticed chaos in the hallway. A large decorative flower vase had been smashed to pieces on the floor. Cassie was upset and pleading that she wanted to get her phone, her bag. She wanted to leave, Flores testified. Flores attempted to de escalate the situation. He accompanied Combs and Cassie as they walked back toward their suite, trying to retrieve Cassie's belongings. Cassie was intent on leaving the hotel entirely, but Combs was blocking her. At one point in the hallway, Combs told Cassie emphatically, "You're not going to leave," according to Flores' testimony. Sensing the woman's fear, Flores intervened and responded to Combs. "Look, if she wants to leave, she's going to leave," effectively standing up to the music star. The confrontation then moved to the open doorway of Combs' suite. Flores testified that as he stood at the threshold, he noticed another man inside the dimly lit room. A male, black, wearing dark clothing, sitting at the corner of the bed, he said. Prosecutors later implied this individual was likely one of the male escort performers involved in that night's freak-off, underscoring that Cassie's attempted departure occurred during a coerced sex encounter gone wrong. Cassie managed to slip into the suite briefly to grab some personal items, then headed out toward the elevators. As she did so, Combs suddenly reached for a bag of cash. Flores recounted that Combs was holding a sack of money with a $100 bill visible on top and tried to hand it to him. He said, "Here, take care of this for me. Don't tell anyone," Flores testified. It was immediately clear to Flores that this was a bribe to buy his silence about the violent incident. "Don't tell nobody," Combs had urged with the stack of cash extended. Flores told the jury he considered it a bribe on the spot. He refused the money. "I don't want your money. Just go back in your room," Flores says he told Combs. After rejecting the payoff, Flores saw Cassie safely to the elevator. He noticed that Cassie already had a visible injury, a purple eye, meaning a swollen bruise around her eye socket, consistent with having been struck. Cassie was shaken but left the floor at the time, effectively ending the immediate confrontation. What Flores witnessed was horrifying enough that he felt the need to document it. He testified that he pulled out his iPhone and recorded the hotel surveillance monitor, which had captured the hallway altercation on video. Flores later wrote up the incident for the hotel, and he saved the video clip privately as well. He candidly admitted he wanted to show his wife what happened, fearing it might sound unbelievable without evidence. In court, prosecutors played portions of those surveillance recordings for the jury, corroborating Flores' account. Jurors saw grainy footage from the Intercontinental's security camera. Cassie is seen at the elevator bank with a bag in her hand when Combs storms in to frame, strikes her in the head, and then throws her to the ground. The video shows Combs kicking Cassie while she's down, then grabbing and dragging her down the hallway, back down towards their suite as she tries to crawl away. Multiple people in the courtroom gallery visibly winced at the brutality on the screen. Prosecutors also showed photos of the aftermath, the shattered vase on the carpet, and the other damage in the hallway outside the room. Flores' testimony underscored that no police were called at the time. It appears the incident was hushed up in 2016, but the visual evidence of Combs' violence was now in front of the jury. Now, on cross-examination, Combs' defense team tried to chip away at Flores' credibility and the completeness of his report. Defense attorney Dale Sindali pressed Flores on why he didn't include certain details in his official hotel incident report back in 2016. For example, Flores had described Combs' devilish stare and scary demeanor in court, but he had not written those subjective impressions in the report filed that night. Flores calmly responded that such descriptors were his opinion at the time, and he stuck to the objective facts in his report. The defense also highlighted that Flores chose not to call the police after the incident. Flores agreed he did not contact law enforcement, explaining that as hotel security, he followed internal protocols. He informed his supervisors and documented it for the hotel. Cassie herself did not request police involvement. The defense implied that if the event were truly as severe as portrayed, Flores or someone would have called 911 immediately. Despite this line of questioning, Flores' core testimony remained unshaken. He personally saw Sean Combs attack Cassie Ventura in an attempt to bribe him to stay silent. This first witness thus delivered in plain terms evidence of both violence and an alleged cover up. Precisely what prosecutors say was part of Combs' modus operandi. The second witness that the state or that the government then calls is a male entertainer named Daniel DJ Phillips, a 34-year-old former male exotic dancer, and he describes freak off encounters that he participated in with Mr. Combs. So the government's next witness shifted the focus from violent aftermath to the intimate details of the alleged sex trafficking scheme. Daniel DJ Phillips, a 34-year-old former male exotic dancer, took the stand as the second prosecution witness. Phillips' testimony dove into Combs' secretive freak-off parties, providing an insider perspective on how those encounters were arranged and what occurred during them. He testified under his real name and described himself as a male stripper for women who occasionally did private engagements. Phillips recounted that in 2012, he was contacted for a high-paying assignment in New York to meet Cassie Ventura and Sean Combs in a suite at the Gramercy Park Hotel. When he arrived, he found Cassie in the room and Sean Combs wearing a white robe. According to Philip, Combs wanted him to have sex with Cassie while Combs watched. Phillips did as requested. He described in graphic terms that he engaged in intercourse with Cassie in a hotel suite, while Combs observed nearby, apparently for Combs' gratification. After this encounter, Phillips said Combs paid him a few $1,000s in cash. That first meeting was not a one-off event. Phillips testified that Combs hired him repeatedly over the following years to essentially recreate the same scenario. On multiple occasions, Philip flew out to meet Combs and Cassie, or sometimes Combs and other women in various cities. The pattern was consistent. Combs would be present, sometimes participating minimally or just as Philip performed sex acts with the women involved. Philip indicated that these sessions were carefully orchestrated by Combs. He would be given instructions on what to do, and Combs often had specific requirements. In some instances, Philip noted drugs were part of the equation. Cassie and any other woman might be under the influence of ecstasy or other substances provided at the encounter. At the prosecution's prompting, Phillips did not shy away from explicit detail, explaining that Combs derived pleasure from watching and would sometimes record video on his phone or a camera while encouraging the participants to perform. These were the events Combs casually referred to as freak offs, essentially private sex shows he orchestrated for himself. Phillips' testimony grew especially poignant when he recounted why he ultimately stopped working for Combs. In one meeting, which took place at Combs' home, Phillips witnessed Combs' temper erupt firsthand. He testified that Cassie was sitting at a computer and Combs called out for her to join him in the bedroom. When Cassie responded, "Hold on a second," Combs became enraged at the minor delay. Mr. Combs walked over to Cassie, grabbed her by the hair, and started dragging her by her hair to the bedroom. Phillips told the courtroom, his voice dropping as he recalled the violence. He then heard what sounded like Combs slapping her repeatedly, and Cassie screaming, I'm sorry," from the other room. The courtroom fell silent as Phillips described the scene. He said he was stunned and frightened. This was beyond anything he had signed up for. After witnessing Combs physically abusing Cassie in that manner, Phillips testified he did not want to participate in any further freak-offs. He effectively cut off contact with Combs' camp following that incident. Phillips also mentioned a chilling detail at one point. Combs insisted on taking a photograph of Phillips' driver's license with his phone. Phillips testified that he considered it a threat. The implication was clear to him. Combs was making sure he had Phillips' personal identifying information, possibly to intimidate him into never speaking about what he saw or did with the couple. This resonated with the prosecution's theme that Combs used fear to ensure loyalty and silence. Indeed, Phillips never went to authorities with his story back then. It was only after investigators approached him following the cascade of allegations in 2023 that he came forward to testify under subpoena. As Phillips gave his testimony, some of Combs' family members had difficulty listening. Three of Combs' daughters, who had been seated in the courtroom gallery, quietly stood up and left during part of Phillips' account when the descriptions turned especially graphic and sexual. Other spectators in the court exchanged glances at Phillips' explicit language, but the witness remained composed, answering the prosecution's questions thoroughly. His testimony provided direct evidence of the freak-off scheme, establishing that Combs did hire male sex partners and orchestrated multiple partner liaisons involving Cassie, which goes to the heart of the sex trafficking and Mann Act charges. During cross-examination, defense attorney Xavier Donaldson aimed to undermine Phillips' credibility and suggest an ulterior motive. Donaldson highlighted that Phillips had been a willing participant in these lurid encounters and even somewhat starstruck by Combs. In fact, Phillips admitted that in some instances, he didn't even ask to be paid and occasionally was not paid at all for his services. In my head, I was just excited I was in his world and happy to be involved with people of such notoriety, Phillips said earlier, indicating that the thrill of rubbing shoulders with a celebrity like Diddy was part of the appeal. The defense seized on this, implying that Phillips was not a victim, but rather an eager opportunist. Donaldson even brought up a marketing slogan of the burlesque entertainment company Phillips worked for, which touted providing the ultimate ladies' night experience. With a slight smirk, the attorney got to Phillips to acknowledge that performing sex acts for money was literally his job description, and suggested that he might be embellishing the danger of coercion now to align with the prosecution's narrative. The defense strategy was clear: portray Phillips as someone who happily took Combs' money for consensual sex work and only turned against Combs once the legal tide shifted, perhaps in hope of publicity or other benefit. Phillips pushed back on any insinuation that he was lying. He calmly affirmed that everything he described, including Combs' violence towards Cassie, actually happened. He conceded that he found Combs' celebrity world exciting at first, but witnessing the abuse changed that. The defense also probed whether Philip ever demanded money from Cassie or tried to blackmail her to suggest he might have an axe to grind. Philip firmly denied this, saying he never sought anything beyond what he was paid and was often content with just being involved socially. He noted that at the very first encounter in 2012, Cassie had actually paid him above his expected fee. He was told by his boss that he'd get $200 for showing up, but Cassie handed him $4,000 in cash, an extremely generous amount. This anecdote, which Philip shared, cut both ways. It showed the lengths Combs' side would go to enhance top-tier participants and keep them happy, suggesting planning and resources behind these sex parties. But it also reinforced that Philip was quite content with the arrangement until the day he saw Cassie in danger. In redirect questioning, prosecutors had Philip reiterate that it was the violence that made him walk away. After seeing Mr. Combs become violent towards Cassie one day, Philip said he ended all contact. His final remarks left a strong impression that Combs' actions had crossed a line that even in someone working in the adult entertainment industry could not tolerate. Notably, Philip's testimony was not completed by the end of day one. His direct examination had been extensive, and cross-examination was still in progress when Judge Subramanian decided to adjourn for the day at 5 p.m. The jury was excused in the middle of Donaldson's cross, meaning Phillips is slated to return to the witness stand on day 2 for further questioning. This left a dramatic tension hanging overnight, with the defense likely to continue attacking Phillips' account first thing in the morning. So, wow, what a day, huh? Now we're going to go over to atmosphere, the next expected steps in this. And again, I prepared this, so I'm going to kind of read this, and then we're going to talk a little bit, and then we're end day one's summary. But day one of the U.S. versus Combs had all the hallmarks of a blockbuster trial. Celebrity supporters, graphic evidence, intense legal sparring, and through it all, Sean Combs remained mostly reserved at the defense table. Reporters in the courtroom noted that Combs often sat stone-faced, focusing his attention on each witness, occasionally whispering to his attorneys. And during Johnson's most brutal descriptions of abuse, Combs did not outwardly react. He leaned back in his chair, eyes forward, appearing stoic, as the prosecutors pointed to him and called him a criminal. And we'll take a look here at what that looks like here. Diddy in court, so you can envision it. And when it came time for the defense's opening, Combs stood up with a calm, solemn posture as Tenny Garagos introduced him to the jury as simply Sean Combs, not Diddy. He clasped his hands in front of him, managed a faint nod to the panel, but otherwise spoke only to his lawyers. Observers described Combs as subdued, a stark contrast from the brash, charismatic persona known to the public. The gravity of the proceedings, which could potentially send him to prison for the rest of his life, was unmistakable. The gallery of the courtroom was filled to capacity with an extraordinary amount of supporters and public and reporters. Among the attendees were Combs' family members. His mother, Janice, sat in the second row, flanked by supporters, and at least 4 of Combs' children were present as well. They remained quiet and attentive, though, as noted, some left when testimony became too graphic. High-profile trials in this Manhattan federal courthouse often draw large crowds, and this was no exception. The courtroom, one of the building's larger venues, seats only about 100, so dozens of spectators had to watch from overflow rooms with video feeds. According to media reports, the public line to enter stretched down the block before dawn, with some diehard fans or observers even camping out. Court security was tight. Everyone underwent extra screening, and U.S. Marshals kept a close watch on the proceedings, especially given the celebrity defendant in a sensitive matter. As 5 p.m. approached, Judge Subramanian made sure the trial stayed on schedule. The judge politely interrupted the defense counsel's cross-examination of Philip to adjourn for the day right at the expected time. The jurors were reminded of their obligations not to research or discuss the case and were told to return the next morning at 9:30 a.m. Do not speak to anyone about the case, not even your family, Judge Subramanian firmly instructed as the jurors filed out. He also repeated earlier warnings about avoiding news coverage an especially pertinent admonition given the trial's extensive media coverage and even a nightly TV docuseries following the case. The jurors, who remain essentially anonymous to the public for their protection, nodded in acknowledgement before being sent away. Once the jury was gone, Combs was placed in handcuffs by U.S. Marshals, a reminder that he's being held without bail during the trial due to prior rulings that he posed a flight risk and a risk of witness tampering. He then quietly was led out of a side door at the Metropolitan Detention back to the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, where he's been detained since his arrest in September 2024. Combs glanced briefly back towards his family as he exited, managing a small smile and a nod. His mother and children waved gently before departing the courtroom themselves, escorted by security. Looking ahead, the day two promises to bring even more significant testimony. The court will resume with a continuation of Phillips' cross-examination. Once Phillips' time on the stand concludes, the prosecution is expected to call Cassie Ventura, Combs' ex-girlfriend and one of the central accusers, likely as the next major witness. Cassie's testimony, if it commences on Tuesday, will be a highly anticipated moment as she could provide a first-person narrative of the alleged 2 decades of abuse and freak-offs from the victim's perspective. Her presence in the courtroom would also mark the first time she and Combs have seen each other in person since their relationship ended in December 2018, a fact the defense acknowledged in its opening. Court observers, including journalists and legal analysts, have noted that Cassie's demeanor and credibility under oath will be pivotal to both sides. By the end of day one, the jurors had already heard 2 vivid and very different stories about Sean Combs. The prosecution, through opening statements and its first witnesses, depicted him as a ruthless predator who used his fame and power to entrap and terrorize women behind closed doors. The defense, through its cross-examinations and counter-narrative, tried to show that Combs may be guilty of infidelities, bad behavior, but not of the federal crimes charged, emphasizing consent and alternative explanations at every turn. The court drama is only beginning to unfold as the trial moves into its second day. Jurors will continue to observe details and, at times, disturbing evidence. Day one set the tone, a serious, methodical presentation of facts and allegations, with both sides rigorously testing each witness. The nation now watches as this high profile case proceeds one day at a time in pursuit of justice and truth in a matter of United States versus Sean Combs. So there you have it, guys. That's day one. And again, I apologize. I'm reading because I'm curating this. I create this so that I can get this information to you and put it out. And now we're going to talk about a little bit about what we just heard and the framing that's going on. So the defense obviously is trying to frame this as, that he did not hire. They're trying to get around the prostitution laws and the trafficking laws by saying they didn't hire them for sex. He hired them for performative acts, much like a porno actor would be hired. And again, that was one of the things I've said in this is how do you, when you have something like this, where this is a production, this is him bringing them in. It's like, and what he's saying is this is like a private porno. And you had consenting adults agreeing to this. You had women involved in a relationship with him. And while he's not the perfect husband, he's not the perfect boyfriend, he's not the perfect anything, does this rise to the level of federal crime? I mean, listen, I think the government is going to go for the shock value here and the violent value and the violence and the shockiness of the acts and the shockiness of the lifestyle. And government's known for doing this. And they're going to go and say, convict this man because of this. Convict this man because you disagree with his lifestyle. So I leave you at that. Day one comes down to, I think that's what's being put before the jury. Are we going to convict this man because we disagree with his lifestyle, because we disagree with his proclivities in the bedroom, because we disagree with how he acted and what he did, or are we going to redefine and allow there to be a redefinition of these acts and behaviors and say now they're criminal? Or are we going to say, wait a minute, this is a guy, we don't agree with this, but this man was doing nothing more than living out fantasies that he was able to live out because of the money he had. And that's the defense's argument. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be an interesting case. And I think I think a very pivotal moment will be how Jane and Cassie come across. and how the cross-examinations of those witnesses will be handled. So I'll be very, very, very looking forward to that, of us breaking that down, going over that, putting that together for you, bringing that to you, because we don't have cameras in the courtroom. So you're going to get me. So give me your feedback, give me your comments. We can do an entire live. We're trying to do at least a live or two a week where we talk about this case, because it's worth talking about. This is a huge case. This is probably going to be one of the most famous cases in federal court. And if he gets convicted of this, it's going to set a very interesting precedent for how for criminalizing behavior. And that's what's happening here. And that's one of the things recently. It's funny because President Trump signed an executive order addressing that very issue. So it will be interesting to see if he were to go the extra mile here and potentially put that into action and say, you know what, if he ends up convicted of this, I'm pardoning him. I'm doing away with this because this is directly in contravance with what he put out in the idea where he was making it clear that we are not going to criminalize behavior or things that we disagree with, and that we've got to start revamping how the federal government approaches these things. Anyways, with that said, guys, I appreciate you guys who made it through this. Hopefully you found this interesting. If you're a member, I'm going to release this entire report to you. So that will be released. So you can have a copy of this. Become a member and you get these reports and copies. Part of the perk of being a member. It may end up, we may have different tiers at some point, but for now, all members will get access to this exclusive report. It comes with links to the articles I used to compile this report. So think of it like, hey, it's like a guide map to the Diddy trial of all the coverage, the best coverage I can find across the nation. Anyways, with that said, guys, I appreciate all of you. Let justice prevail, and I'll be talking to you soon.
The system's rigged, man, it's time to break free. Eyes wide open, gotta see what I see. Standing on the front lines, fighting for the truth. Lift the veil of lies, it's time to be the proof. Take a stand, don't you back down. Raise your voice, let's shake the town. We're the voices that won't be ignored. Breaking chains, yeah, we're ready for war. With the power of the people, we'll make them see a world of justice, united and free. United and free. United and free. Marching with a purpose, we're taking it higher. Fighting through the struggle, igniting the fire. No more silence, we'll make the noise loud. Together in this battle, standing strong and proud. Injustice fades when courage aligns. Rise up together, break the confines. We're the voices that won't be ignored. Breaking chains, yeah, we're ready for war. With the power of the people, we'll make them see a world of justice, united and free. United and free. United and free. So rise up now, it's our time to shine. Together we'll write a new paradigm. You paradigm, you paradigm. Whoa, whoa. We're the voices that won't be ignored. Breaking chains, yeah, we're ready for war. With the power of the people, we'll make them see a world of justice, united and free. United and free. Rise up now. free.